You know, this is a very difficult and sensitive subject. And in this case, a woman says she felt like her privacy was being violated.
Men, grown men with big in the women's locker room. And that's why I'm getting kicked out. And I want to make sure the girls know.
It's a video that's gone viral. Singer Tish Hyman was furious. She says she was naked in the women's locker at her gym, formerly Gold's Gym, now EOS Fitness in Hollywood, when she realized there was a man inside.
You know, there is no greater issue that shows that pushing back against the left absolutely works than the issue of the transes that the left try to shove down everybody's throat. And for a very long time in this nation, you basically could not avoid it, and you were shunned, named, and shamed if you spoke out with any kind of reasonable objection against it. Again, it used to be the left was pushing shows with trans as kids, talking about how not only do we need to make these procedures free and readily available for adults, but we have to start considering whether or not it is appropriate for states to take away people's children if parents refuse to affirm their gender identity. That is where we were just a couple of years ago on this issue, but now, right here in this moment, we have an incident where a woman discovers that a biological male was standing behind her naked in the locker room. Full frontal nudity, by the way, is what is being described. She ends up freaking out. The gym reacts in a woke way by booting her from the gym, but most of the people who see this video, who see this controversy, end up siding with the woman rather than the person who says that he is a woman. And this is what we're going to talk about today. The pushback, the backlash, the fact that the gym still complied with the woke ideology, but how this is a good indicator of how important it is to push back against left-wing absurdity, because what ultimately ended up happening in this country is that we changed an issue that people were afraid to talk about, regular ordinary people, to an issue where the general consensus is no, this is not okay, this is not acceptable, and we should fight against it. But before we get into that, I want to thank all of you who sneak up behind me in the locker room over at actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money, okay?
I was in shock. I was scared. And I told him to leave. He would not leave. Had no regard for my naked body standing there.
She says it's not the first time it's happened.
It has happened to me in a 2-week span 4 times in that bathroom. I turned around to men and they're naked 4 times. And I reported it to the people in the front. They did nothing. They did absolutely nothing. Stay out of the women's locker room. We don't want it.
We are not showing this person's face because they have not committed any crime or violation that we know of. But Tish alleges it was a nasty confrontation.
So the local news media decided that they were going to blur the face of the trans individual at the center of this controversy. It is their prerogative to choose to do so, but make no mistake about it, there are multiple videos of this person where you could see their face, and I think it's important for you to see the face of the person that we're talking about, because it does not look like in any way, shape, or form this person passes for a female. They look quite masculine. They're at the gym, and obviously if you're a woman and you see somebody full frontal naked that all indications show you that they're male, then yeah, it's understandable to have a problem over it. It's understandable to freak out over it, especially when the gym that you are a member of, that you're paying for, is telling you, no, everything's okay. You're the one who's crazy. And of course, this is aided and abetted by some in the left-wing media.
I just had the worst experience ever at the gym, at Gold's Gym, and I think this is probably happening at gyms across America. We're like, trans women are going into the women's locker room and not really caring about how women feel about it. And it's really hurtful, yo. Like, how you gonna say you want to be a woman or that you are a woman, but you don't give a f how women feel? Today I was naked in the locker room. I turned around and there's a man there. He said to me verbatim, straight women like to see D word. So if anything, they're looking at me more than you in there.
So we get a little bit more about this particular altercation, and one of the things that you ultimately end up discovering is that rather than somebody who's trying to embrace womanhood, who's just trying to fit in and not stick out in the locker room amongst their fellow ladies, wink wink, you have somebody who's incredibly crass and doesn't give a damn about what actual women think about their presence in the locker room. And this is why when Tish Hyman ends up confronting this individual, you get a vulgar, disgusting response, which is, oh, well, straight women like looking at D. This black woman, by the way, is a lesbian, so they're more excited for me to be in here than for you to be in here. Again, according to Tish's account of events. Also, I would not be me if I did not take note of the fact that this woman is called Tish Hyman, and she's saying that a D made her burst. And I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying that's a little bit on the nose or on the vagina, if we're being perfectly honest. I'm not, again, I'm sorry about that. Let's get back into the story before I lose control of this segment.
And my response was complete shock, and I said, what?
First of all, I love the exaggerated response right there. I think that is 100% appropriate for the situation. But also, you really have to think about this from a psychological point of view, from this trans's individual. Because again, we are told that these people, they just want to be women. There's no perverted angle that they have on these particular situations. Even if they don't do anything to make the transition to women, they're women on the inside, because a woman is like a circular definition. Don't even ask them the Matt Walsh question, because they won't be able to figure it out, and they're not trying to get anything out of this, like any kind of gratification. However, upon initial confrontation from this actual woman in the locker room who happens to be a lesbian, we immediately descend into the gutter, into vulgar commentary, into the sexualization of his position in that particular locker room, which again basically validates the fears that these women have, because it's not just Tish. She happens to be the one who spoke up. It's a bunch of other people at the gym that have a problem with this. And again, the gym, for their part, has taken the trans's side. They have said, the actual woman, not welcome here. You're a big problem. How dare you expect for there to be women in the women's locker room, you absolute disgusting freak.
Both were kicked out of Gold's Gym following the confrontation, and Tish says she lost her membership. She insists she has nothing against transgender people, but she takes issue with what she describes as men being allowed in women's restrooms.
You're just gonna have to deal with it no matter how uncomfortable it makes you. And again, I say this as somebody who has not gone super hard on the transes issue. You'll notice on my channel, we don't do a lot of stories of this weirdo looking LGBT person does this thing. And I'm also somebody who's kept it 100 with you on the issue of transes in the regular bathrooms, that I don't think that's such a big deal, because as somebody who spends time with, actual women who exist, and I know that women's bathroom lines can be long, I understand that sometimes women go to the much shorter men's room line. It doesn't create a big societal problem for the most part, and it would be weird to have laws that prosecute women for doing so, especially when the women's bathroom line tends to be significantly longer. So in that regard, it's not something that really bothers me all that much, because again, you have to be in your own stall and all these other barriers. But in the locker room, in terms of sports, in terms of all these other shared communal spaces that are all about getting women away from men, having them to have their own carve out, this is where it runs into problems. This is where my super chill stance on public bathrooms in restaurants and whatnot does not actually match up with what else ends up being an implication from having these woke laws. Because yeah, you have a bunch of women that are essentially held hostage by this guy, even though a normal sane society would separate the two. And for those of you who are saying, oh, in other cultures, we don't do the gender separation, well, who cares? We're in this culture, we're in this country, this is what women come to expect. And if they were to be surprised with a random naked male in all these different various spaces, a good portion of women would refuse to go to those spaces because they would not feel comfortable. And again, it's absolutely crucial for you to understand that this is a major component of the left-wing agenda, blurring the differences between men and women, allowing these shared spaces to be yielded to weirdo dudes who make vulgar comments when confronted, and it's not acceptable. We should be able to have female-only spaces. It's not that complicated. We've had them for a long time in the United States of America. All we have to do is go back, and I'm sorry, but the trans is very small percentage of the population. You're gonna have to figure something else out. If it's no big deal, no matter what locker room that you're in, and it shouldn't impact anybody at all, then guess what? Go to the locker room that actually corresponds with your biological biological sex. Again, you're saying it's no big deal, nothing to worry about.
Trans people have a right to exist. They need their own locker rooms and their own spaces. It does not make sense to put them in the same room with women.
Now again, we hear from this woman right here that she's not really against the transes. She wants them to have their own special accommodation. I think you should just go to the one that corresponds with your sex. Again, a gym is a voluntary organization. The transes are choosing to be members there. If this is something that bothers them, then they can go work out at home. I really don't give a damn. It is not a big deal to me at all whatsoever. But the fact is, you shouldn't have to, as a business, build a third locker room for a small percentage of the population. You should just have a sensible policy.
The gym's policy is to defer to state law, which says you can use the restroom that aligns with your gender identity.
Now, one of the things that I find interesting is that statement right there from the gym, because initially they made the decision to revoke the membership of Tish Hyman, saying that she was the problem because they're still behind on where the culture is at in the United States of America. But when confronted by the media, they released a very generic statement saying that they're just following state law. But the state law cited is that you're allowed to use the bathroom that corresponds with your gender identity according to California state law. But this isn't a bathroom. This is a locker room. Again, the bathroom distinction versus the locker room versus the sports and all of that should be made right here, because I do think if the law just says the bathroom and not whatever facility that you're allowed to identify as you get to go to, then yeah, there is a gym policy at play here, and them changing their name to a different name in order to avoid scrutiny is not good enough in my opinion. And yes, this woman, Tish Hyman, 100% right. Except for the thing about you needing a third set of locker rooms, I agree with her 1,000%. You should not have to deal with this stuff just because our society has gone a bit insane. And again, considering all the efforts and strides that women have made to get themselves protected spaces and whatnot from men, for that to be invaded for what ostensibly is a men's rights movement is absolutely absurd and ridiculous. But again, this is the consequence for over embracing intersectional feminism. But you know what? Those are just my thoughts. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. As per usual, if you liked the video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on the social medias, support me via support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about a woman very uncomfortable with biological males in the locker room. Till next time.